Richardson lined up as the fullback. Going to Jones. Jones has the first down, and the Jets are now on their way to Indianapolis.
A remarkable first season for Rex Ryan and the Jets.
It is. They established an identity with the Jets. That defense will only get better next year.
Sanchez backpedals. What will be the final play of their season. Jones down at the 45, and this one's over. The Indianapolis Colts are the AFC champions.
It looks like this team played with anger all day. Why, Bart?
For all you non-believers, disrespect us, talk crap about the defense like we ain't the third best defense in the league. All we hear is about their defense. They can't stop a nosebleed. 25th in the league, and we the one to get disrespected.
Congratulations. See you in Pittsburgh.
Can't wait.
Second and goal from the 4. Tomlinson shifts to the right. Sanchez looks left. He's got his man, and it's a touchdown. Kutchery has it for the Jets. The Jets have scored 18 unanswered. It's a one-score difference at 24-19. Third down coming up. What do you expect here, Phil?
It could be, well, the Steelers could run a quarterback draw, but there's so many defenders inside, it's probably not going to work. 5 wide receivers, looks like they're going to throw it. Surprise.
Yeah. And they are looking throw. Now, Roethlisberger in trouble, throws it, and what a catch! The catch to clinch it in all likelihood. Brown, who had the big one last week, the long gainer to set up the winner, this time picks up the first down.
And Rex Ryan knows that's it.
One more and it's official. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the AFC champions.
Just a little playoff montage of the Rex Ryan era, starting with the impressive win over the 13-3 San Diego Chargers in 2009 AFC divisional playoffs, and ending with the Jets' loss in the 2010 AFC Championship Game with Pittsburgh. So, in 2008, the Jets failed to reach the postseason after falling apart in the final games of the Brett Favre, Eric Mangini era. So in comes Rex Ryan, and Woody Johnson wanted a different coach than what Eric Mangini was. Mangini was a real control freak, so Johnson decided to go with more of a player's coach in hiring Rex Ryan. So the former defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens, who had just reached the AFC Championship Game in 2008, Ryan was a highly sought-after commodity. Actually, he thought he was going to get the job with the Baltimore Ravens, but they chose to go with John Harbaugh instead. So, Ryan, with his bravado and tough talk, made an immediate impact on New York, announcing that he was not going to kiss Bill Belichick's rings in his first press conference that introduced him to the media. So along with Ryan, the Jets also drafted their quarterback of the future in 2009 of the 2009 draft, when they traded up to draft USC quarterback Mark Sanchez. Now, with Sanchez and Ryan aboard, the Jets opened strong, winning their first 3 games, including a 16-9 victory over the hated Patriots and Tom Brady, snapping an 8-game home losing streak against them. However, after that, the Jets suffered losses in 6 of their next 7 games, and they sat at 4-6. 4-6. They look sick. 4-6 and looked like anything but a playoff team at that point. They were falling apart at the end of games. They lost the game to Miami that they led late. They lost the game to the Jaguars that they led late. Then another disaster against Miami where they allowed 2 kickoff returns to Ted Ginn. So anyway, they're sitting at 4-6, okay, and it looks like the season isn't going anywhere. But at that point, they rallied to win 3 straight, and they were on their way to a 4th straight against the Falcons when once again the early season inability to finish out a game struck, and they lost as the Matt Ryan-led Falcons scored a touchdown in the final minute to defeat the Jets. So in the post-game news conference, or the press conference, I should say, not news conference, press conference, Rex Ryan gave up on the season or admitted that their playoff chances were all but over. And, he was pretty sad, and dejected that the Jets once again couldn't stop a team from scoring in the final minute, despite playing a great defensive game all game. However, Ryan was wrong, and the Jets were not eliminated from playoff contention. He conceded that they were actually mathematically eliminated, but they weren't. So upon finding that out and that he misspoke, Ryan was relieved, and so were actually all Jet fans. So what had happened was there was a misunderstanding in the playoff scenarios. Then actually the Patriots, or I forget what had happened that changed the scenarios, but within the 4 o'clock games, that the Jets looked like they were being eliminated from the postseason changed. And suddenly the Jets held their postseason chances in their own grasp. So they controlled their own destiny, all right? However, one of the wins that they would have to have in the final 2 games of the season was defeating the undefeated Indianapolis Colts, who were 14-0, all right? And then they would then finish up the season at home against the Bengals, who were also playoff bound and were getting ready to win the AFC North. So it's not like the Jets had 2 gimmies, okay? But anyway, they catch a big break because the Colts, after taking a lead 15-10 in the second half, decide to pull their starters and decide that a perfect season is not in the cards, and they really want to rest Peyton Manning and rest the rest of their starters and kind of be ready for the postseason. So they pull all their starters, and thanks to Manning sitting down and Curtis Painter coming in, the Jets then outscore the Colts 19-0 the rest of the way, and then the following week they just manhandle the Cincinnati Bengals, who themselves were kind of preparing for the playoffs. They had nothing to play for other than they might rather play the Houston Texans in the first round instead of the New York Jets. Or I forgot how it worked out, but they would have either gotten the Texans or the Baltimore Ravens in the first round. They decided that they wanted the Jets. They proceed to get absolutely annihilated by the Jets, 37-0, in what turned out to be the final game at the Meadowlands. But anyway, that just happened to work incredibly in the Jets' fortune. So you had 2 teams that were already going to the playoffs, and both decided that they really weren't going to challenge the Jets. Say what you want about the Bengals in that game. They played their starters for the first half, but they really looked like they had no intention of winning that game, and the Jets just manhandled them. So if I was the Houston Texans, I probably would have been a little bit ticked off. But nonetheless, the Jets reached the postseason when at 4-6 it looked like they had no chance. And you had Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez now getting that valued playoff experience for a first-year head coach and a first-year quarterback. So that was huge, the Jets being able to make the playoffs in that situation. They get the 5th seed in the AFC. So not only do they make the playoffs, but they're not the 6th seed. The Ravens are. So there's a chance that if things would have broken their way, the Jets would have actually had a home playoff game in the AFC Championship game, but that would have only meant that the Ravens had advanced there as well. I mean, it's not likely, but I'm just saying that despite looking like they were out of it, they weren't even the final seed. They were the 5th seed. So their first round of the playoffs in a wild card game, they play a rematch against the Bengals, who they just, again, manhandled the week before, 37-0. And you figure that the Bengals were going to be a little ticked off at the way that the Jets rubbed it in and be ready to play. Again, the Bengals, it's not like the Bengals had great postseason success. They had not won a postseason game since 1990. So they were going into it, really hungry for, and their fans hungry for a postseason win. Well, with all that in their court, having been buried the week before and embarrassed, Darrelle Revis totally shut down Chad Johnson or Chad Ochocinco or whatever he was calling himself then, the Jets still managed to overcome an early 7-0 deficit and beat the Bengals pretty easily to advance to the divisional round against the San Diego Chargers. Now, I think most people going into that game didn't give the Bengals a huge advantage. Yes, they were at home. They had a better record. The Jets were only 9-7, but you could still make a pretty big case for the Jets winning, especially with the way that they handled them the week before in the season finale. So that wasn't much of a surprise, but nonetheless, the Jets have their first playoff win since they defeated the Chargers in 2004 in the divisional round, the wild card round. Well, now they get the Chargers in a divisional round, a different team with not Drew Brees as quarterback, but Phillip Rivers. And this Charger team were also AFC West champions, but they were 13-3, and they had the number 2 seed in the AFC, as the Colts had the number 1 seed. And also, the Chargers had an 8-game winning streak, so they were really playing very well at that point. And they looked, very talented. So they had a great tight end, Antonio Gates. They had Darren Sproles, Vincent Jackson, LaDainian Tomlinson. This was a very, very talented Charger team. So the Chargers once again get off to, like the Bengals the week before, get off to an early 7-0 lead. And it looks like they're controlling the game for most of the way. They lead 7-3 going into the fourth quarter. However, the Jets have a fourth quarter rally and wind up defeating the Chargers by outscoring them 14-7 in the fourth quarter, which included a Sean Green touchdown run from 53 yards out and more missed field goals from Nate Kading, who had cost the Chargers their earlier playoff matchup against the Jets in 2004. And Kading was basically automatic heading to that game. I think he had something like 37 consecutive field goals from inside 40 yards. And in that game, he missed 2 field goals from inside 40 yards. So nonetheless, the Jets pull a huge upset by defeating the 13-3 Chargers. And now they are AFC Championship Game bound in the rookie season of Rex Ryan as head coach and Mark Sanchez as quarterback. Okay? So now you have another team that the Jets took advantage of in the regular season, kind of ticked off to where, hey, we allowed this team to get into the postseason because we decided to give up in our Week 15 matchup. Now we're going to get our revenge. Actually, it's a Week 16 matchup. But now we're going to get our revenge on the Jets and beat them like we should have beaten them in Week 16. Okay? So the Jets, to everyone's shock, start off very well. And with about 4 minutes left in the first half, have a 17-6 lead. However, in the biggest drive of the game, Peyton Manning led them down the field right before halftime to a touchdown to cut the lead to 17-13. And I think right there that changed the momentum of the game. It turns out that in the second half, the Jets kind of fall apart. They have some injuries to Thomas Jones. They can't run the ball as well. They wind up being outscored 17-0 in the second half to fall short of the Super Bowl. But nonetheless, they had a very successful first year under Rex Ryan, okay? So year 2 of the Rex Ryan era started with Hard Knocks on HBO, one of the more groundbreaking shows for HBO at the time, which really went in depth in the football world to a team's training camp. And a lot of teams were vying for that. Now hardly anybody wants to do it, but back then it was pretty popular. And the Jets were the it team then, okay? They played very well at the end of the season in 2009. They just missed going to the Super Bowl after having a 17-6 lead in the championship game at one point. And everybody loved Rex Ryan and this bravado that he brought to the table, claiming that the Jets were going to win a Super Bowl, okay? So the other thing that started then is Darrelle Revis, the best player probably the Jets ever had. He decides to hold out, and that's kind of the whole drama of this, Hard Knock show. Is Revis going to come? Is he not? When is he going to sign? They make it through the entire preseason without Revis being there. Revis winds up actually signing with the Jets the Sunday before the season starts. They signed with them like the Sunday the week before. So if he signed with them, I believe on September 5th of 2010, the season for the Jets started September 13th. So Revis signs just in time for the regular season to start, okay? So the Jets go out against the Ravens. They lose in their season opener. Everyone's so excited, though, that this is going to be the Jets' year. And it doesn't get off to a great start, but, the Ravens were good, and it still looked like the Jets were going to have a much, be a team to contend with in the AFC in 2010, all right? Revis was back. They had just a tremendous amount of confidence, and even though they lost that first game, they kind of took off from there, and they wound up starting 9-2, okay? And one of those 9 wins was a very impressive 28-14 win over the New England Patriots, okay? And that was actually the week after they had lost to the Ravens. So both the Jets and the Patriots are sitting at 9-2 atop the AFC East as they get ready to prepare for a Monday night showdown in Foxborough, okay? In that game, the Patriots showed why they are the Patriots and why they have won all these AFC East titles in a row outside of 2008, and why they have Tom Brady and why they have won 3 Super Bowls up to that point. They absolutely embarrassed the Jets 45-3. So there's no doubt as to who the real champion is in the AFC East at that point, okay? The Jets were kind of shell-shocked by getting beat that bad, all right? And then after the game, you had, everyone saying, well, the Jets might be good, but they're not the Patriots, and in the end, they're still the same old Jets. So as a result of that game, the Patriots finished 14-2. They win the division easily, and the Jets, even though they didn't win the division and they didn't win 14 games, they still won 11 games, which for the Jets is pretty good. That actually tied for the second most wins in franchise history, and is only the 4th time in franchise history that they won as many as 11 games. Okay? So they go into the playoffs at 11-5, and they have an incredibly hard task in the playoffs, an incredibly tough task of not only winning 3 road playoff games to reach the Super Bowl, but most likely they're going to have to beat 3 quarterbacks who had at least won 1 Super Bowl in the wild card game facing Peyton Manning, who had won a Super Bowl, in the divisional round, if things broke right, playing Tom Brady, who had won 3 Super Bowls, and in the championship game having to play Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers, who had won 2 Super Bowls. So that's the task the Jets had ahead of them. Kind of like a revenge tour with the Colts and the Patriots in the first 2 games. So the first stop on the revenge tour is in Indianapolis, where the Jets defeat the defending AFC champion Indianapolis Colts and Peyton Manning 17-16 on a field goal by Nick Folk as time expired, 32-yard field goal. So they're going to now the AFC divisional game in a rematch with the Patriots, okay? The Patriots at this point think the Jets are a joke. They manhandled them when the money was on the line, and they figure, what's going to be any different now than when we played them a few weeks ago on Monday night? Well, it turns out that things were different. And the revenge theme reared its head again as the Jets, seemingly humiliated by that loss earlier in the season, played perhaps the best game they've played in their franchise history outside of Super Bowl III. They wound up beating the Patriots 28-21 and defeating the hated Brady and Belichick combo. And again, it was such a big moment for the Jets that I think everyone kind of worried that, oh my gosh, are the Jets going to think that they've arrived now? They still have another game to win. But even the most negative Jet fan had a feeling of this is their time. There's just something like when the Red Sox were down 3-0 against the Yankees and came back to win those 3 games and got ready to play Game 7. I think even the most negative Red Sox fan was feeling confident. I think that's how Jet fans were feeling. And after beating Manning and Brady, 2/3 of the impossible chore of beating 3 quarterbacks who had previously won a Super Bowl. This was their time. However, they are the Jets, and things just don't naturally work out that way. So even though it was a mere impossibility to think that the Jets would overlook the AFC Championship game, that's kind of what happened. And they go in there, they get outscored 24-0 in the first half. And despite scoring 19 unanswered points in the second half, can't stop the Steelers with the game on the line. Roethlisberger gets a pair of first downs, clinches the game, and the Steelers win the championship game. And for the second straight year, the Jets are turned away. Okay? So now you have an incredibly successful first 2 years from Ryan and Sanchez, thinking that the Jets found their franchise quarterback, and they found a really exciting, good head coach who is brash, he's confident, and he has his team on the right track. So I think most Jet fans at that point were confident. So 2011 starts, and then the decline begins. What happened at the beginning of 2011 was roster changes and what they thought were improvements to the offense. And now again, Rex Ryan was heavily involved in player personnel decisions. They decided to replace popular contributing wide receivers such as Braylon Edwards and Jericho Cotchery with guys like Plaxico Burress and Derek Mason. Didn't work out. They didn't have the same chemistry with Sanchez, but the Jets still at one point are at 8-5 and look like they can make the postseason. That is until they lose their final 3 games of the year in typical same old Jets fashion, finish 8-8 and miss the playoffs. Then the next season, they bring in Tim Tebow, who was the hero of the Broncos the year before, leading them to a playoff win, thinking that Tebow could come in and run the Wildcat with new offensive coordinator Tony Sparano. However, they didn't realize how bad of a quarterback Tebow was. The Wildcat package never worked out, and to make matters really worse, DiLeo Rivas, again, the best player that ever played for the Jets, in my opinion, has a season-ending knee injury against the Dolphins, lost for most of the regular season, and a hopeful season turns into a 6-10 season. Now, the pressure's kind of on Ryan at that point. He had made a lot of these personnel decisions that did not work out. Woody Johnson is getting kind of sick at seeing the Jets go from 11-5 Super Bowl contender. They had lost 14 of 32 games. They were 14-18 in 2011 and 2012 under Rex Ryan. Decides to take the personnel reins from Ryan, hires a new GM in firing Mike Tannenbaum. But the thing is, he didn't bring in a GM that could talent evaluate. He brought in another GM that was a salary cap guy because the Jets were in bad salary cap space as well. Tannenbaum could have done that job, but instead they decided to go out and hire John Idzik. But the mistake was they hired him as a both personnel guy and a salary cap guy, which he wasn't a personnel guy, and everyone knew that. So Ryan gets a lot of those decisions taken away, but in turn gets put to a guy who was even worse than he was. And despite getting the Jets out of bad salary cap position, he did a very good job at creating a lot of salary cap space. His personnel decisions were atrocious, and in John Idzik's 2 seasons, the Jets go 12-20 and have a slew of bad draft picks and even worse free agent signings. Okay? So at the end of the 2014 season, a season in which the Jets lost 8 games in a row, started 2-11, and at this point Rex Ryan is basically, after pulling a miraculous 2013 where they went 8-8, God knows how, a great coaching job by Ryan, there's just something that was taken away from him in his personality. He was no longer brash. He was no longer had this bravado. Different kind of coach. And it kind of showed in the way the Jets had played. They didn't have that confidence. But beyond that, they were void of any type of playmakers on the team because Idzik made such poor personnel decisions. So, after the 2014 season and going 12-20 in the John Idzik era, he is fired, and in comes Mike Maccagnan as the general manager after a little bit of a search, and also Rex Ryan, who you knew was out the door anyway after the 4-12 season. He is replaced by Todd Bowles, who was the defensive coordinator of the Arizona Cardinals. So along with that, though, which was the kind of sad part of this whole thing, was the promise that started off with Mark Sanchez after having such successful first 2 seasons, leading them to back-to-back AFC Championship games. He greatly regressed. So by the end of the 2012 season, the Jets decide that they want to draft a new quarterback. They draft Geno Smith, and they decide to play Sanchez in a preseason game. At the end of the game, behind third-string offensive lineman, Sanchez gets hurt, separates his shoulder, and that was the last play that he ever made as a New York Jet. They released him after the 2013 season, and a career that started off with 4 road playoff wins in his first 2 years, more than Drew Brees has now, was over. So great promise at the beginning of Ryan Sanchez's era, ended with the same frustrating finality of no Super Bowl, no division title, and that same old confusion as to where is this organization going, what direction are we headed in, who is our franchise quarterback. None of those questions are answered when it looked like they had finally figured it out at the beginning of the Ryan and Sanchez era. We are joined once again by ESPN College Game Day's Chris Fallica. Now, not only does Chris do an amazing job in researching and being the right-hand man for guys like Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, Lee Corso on ESPN College Game Day, but Chris is also an expert in Jet history, and I really think his view on things is very unique, and he gives a great perspective. So, Chris, talking about the Rex Ryan era, and especially how it ended with how they brought in John Idzik, and Rex kind of lost the ability to maneuver, maybe that he had deserved with how the Jets had fallen in 2011 and 2012 under him. But do you think that Rex got a raw deal, especially in his final 2 seasons with the team?
I think Rex absolutely got a raw deal. I think the biggest problem was the team kind of got gutted around him. Mark Sanchez had 2 pretty good. I mean, he was never a stat sheet stuffer,
right?
But he was a good player his first couple of years. And then you take away Brad Smith,
right?
And you take away his other weapons at receiver. You take away Cotry, you take away Braylon Edwards.
Right.
You took away his guys.
Right, I know.
And I think that had as much to do with he had some retirees on the offensive line, and I think that had as much to do with his regression as anything else. That the cast around him was really deteriorated by some poor personnel moves, and Tannenbaum was there for the start of it, but then it really went south when they brought in John Idzik, who I just never understood.
Right.
That hire. That, to me, I know a lot of people said no to the job and didn't want the spotlight in New York, and maybe didn't want to, maybe there were some contingencies where if they got the job, they needed to keep Rex on because Rex had such a great relationship with Woody Johnson. But it was clear that they came in with the plan that, okay, Rex will be the coach for 1 more year, then I'm going to fire him and I'm going to bring in my own guy. And I think that with that first draft that Idzik had, and then he kept all those terrible draftees on the roster basically just to say, oh, I drafted 9 guys so they all made the roster. I think the ill will that guy brought to the fan base and the front office in general with him there, he was behind the 8 ball from day one. And then when he put on that sham of a quarterback competition, which was never a quarterback competition, and they trot Mark Sanchez out there against the Giants in the 4th quarter with 7-string linemen out there protecting him,
right?
And he has a soldier, and that was it. Okay, yeah, Geno's our guy now. Well, And Genius, I remember being 2.5 years ago, draft night, and I was not an Idzik guy because I never really understood why you fire or Mike Tannenbaum leaves. He's a salary cap guy, and then you bring in John Idzik, who was another salary cap guy.
Right.
You needed a personnel guy. You needed a scout. You needed someone with a good football background to come in and reinstill football players on that roster.
Right.
And you bring in a numbers guy who, oh, wow, yeah, he drafted Sheldon Richardson, or he drafted Muhammad. Well, you know why he did? Because he had a pick available for getting rid of Darrelle Revis. Then he had a chance to bring Darrelle Revis back at a discounted price, and he didn't do it.
Nope.
And the New England Patriots do it at a discounted price, and they win the Super Bowl with one of the best 5 or 6 players that ever wore a Jet uniform.
Right.
All this stuff built up, and then it was clear, and then it was real funny to see. I shouldn't say funny. I don't want to make light of someone losing their job and whatever else, but it was very interesting to see how the tone of the people who were very hard on Rex and, oh, he doesn't develop any offensive players, or they can't win the big one over Rex, making these Super Bowl guarantees and he can't deliver, to a lot of people beginning to see the real issue in the fact that John Idzik was not a very good general manager, and he did not put together a good team. And he I remember him saying, "Oh, well, the 2013. It's about the off season between 2013 and 2014. It's about that free agent class and the next year and getting draft picks for that class.
Right.
And then you go out and you have a terrible draft again.
Right.
And you sign no defensive backs to help your terrible defense.
Right.
You don't help your quarterback situation. You bring in Chris Johnson, who is running on fumes. It was apparent that he wasn't going to contribute, and I think it became apparent, like, oh my God, this guy made a bunch of really bad decisions, and you know what? He's the problem. And it was really interesting to see that storyline develop. But then that mid-season head scratcher of a press conference that he had.
Oh my gosh!
I mean that was
right
then and there.
That was right out of the Twilight Zone.
I remember sending Peter Saccone, who you know Peter as well, lifelong Jets fan.
Yes.
At that moment, we both, I think, sent each other the same exact note at the same time. This guy is gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no way Woody Johnson was going to have that guy be the face of, because there's one thing that Woody Johnson hates more than losing.